That morning, my little bakery still smelled of sourdough and sweet cinnamon. I thought it would be just another quiet day. But then, I saw her. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, hair tangled, wearing a faded coat, running alone down the cold morning street. She placed a crumpled dollar bill on the counter, panting hard. "I want to buy bread for my grandpa." Alone, in the freezing mist. My heart sank. I decided to walk her home, just to ease my mind. But I never expected what waited behind that old wooden door. In a broken-down pigsty, a living soul lay gasping for air. Its belly was swollen, red, stretched so tight it looked ready to burst. Its glassy eyes stared at nothing, as if begging, "Will anyone in this world save me?" My name is Mabel Hart. I'm 65 years old. I've lived my whole life in Maple Ridge, a small town where every street feels as familiar as the lines on my hand. My weathered wooden house sits tucked by a row of pines, the paint peeling, the roof groaning each time the wind shifts with the season. There's nothing fancy here, just a sourdough oven that's burned hot for 3 generations and a colony of strays who treat me like family. 3 years ago, I lost my husband. Since then, this bakery has had only one pair of hands to knead the dough, to feed the starter, to place each loaf on the shelf. Sometimes I asked myself, who am I baking for? But then I realized, the smell of fresh bread each morning was what kept the house breathing. Neighbors would come by, leave a few coins in the old tin jar, and I'd have a reason to rise again. That morning, when the first tray came out of the oven, I opened the kitchen window to let the steam roll out to the porch. Patch, my oldest gray cat, wound around my legs and gave a short meow as if to remind me, "It's time." I smiled, placed a basket of warm sourdough on the wooden table, and breathed in the peace. I was sure nothing unusual would happen. Then I saw her, a tiny figure darting across the street, her faded coat flapping, her messy hair sticking to cheeks pink from the cold. In her small hand, she clutched a wrinkled bill. She stopped at my counter, panting, eyes wide as though she feared I'd send her away. "Ma'am, I'd like 1 soft loaf for my grandpa." Her voice trembled, but she tried to sound steady. I looked down and saw how tightly she held that bill, like it carried her whole world inside it. I was stunned. A child, no more than 7, out alone in the freezing dawn. I leaned closer. "You came by yourself?" She nodded, whispered low, as if afraid the wind would hear. "Grandpa can't walk, and I don't want him to go hungry." So simple. Yet it cut straight through me. In her eyes I saw a kind of weight no child should ever carry. I wrapped the loaf in a paper bag and handed it to her, then couldn't help but ask, "What's your name?" "Lucy May." "And where do you live, Lucy?" "2 blocks from here, at the end of the street in a wooden house. It's just me and Grandpa." Her innocent tone held a truth too heavy. Parents gone, leaving her in the care of an old man already frail. I froze, remembering my own loss, the long silence after my husband passed. A draft pushed through the window, rattling the curtain. I looked at Lucy, then at the long, empty road behind her. A 7-year-old girl running to buy bread for her sick grandfather, all alone. It wasn't right. Patch jumped onto the table, green eyes fixed on me as if urging me forward. I drew a deep breath, bent down, and said, "Let me walk you home. It's not safe to be alone." Lucy hesitated, clutching the bag, then nodded. Her eyes brightened a little, as if she'd just found someone on her side. I slipped on my heavy coat, grabbed the basket, and locked the door. The cats scattered, Patch settling on the step like a watchman. I took Lucy's hand. It was cold, so small against my flower-cracked palm. We walked down the stone-paved street. Morning mist clung low, soft as smoke. I glanced at her, saw her bite her lip, her gaze worried but steady. Children shouldn't have to bear this, I thought. "Lucy, how long have you been walking alone like this?" I asked softly. "Since Grandpa couldn't anymore." "I'm used to it. I just hope it doesn't get too dark." Her words slowed my steps. I gripped her hand tighter, feeling like I was holding her fragile childhood itself. We passed porches, rows of trees, until the town narrowed into a quieter corner. A weathered wooden house came into view, paint peeling, yard silent. Lucy pointed. "That's my home." I nodded, but I didn't know yet. Behind that door, in the damp shadows of the yard, something waited that would change everything. Lucy's wooden house sat sunken in a muddy yard, walls stained, porch warped. The front door creaked open, and there he was. Earl. An old man with clouded eyes, his chest rising and falling in heavy labor. On the table beside him sat a cough syrup bottle and a dim oil lamp. Lucy ran straight to him, holding up the loaf. "Grandpa, I got bread." His trembling hands reached out, lips pressed tight. He whispered, "Thank you, child." The sight stopped me cold. Just the two of them, leaning into each other, fragile as small candles flickering against the wind. Then I heard it. A sound. Low, broken, a drawn-out moan, like someone's breath was being squeezed away. It didn't come from the house. It came from behind, where the stench of dampness hung heavy. I lifted my head. Lucy's eyes flicked toward the abandoned pigsty in the yard. Fear flashed across her face. I stepped closer. The wooden shed sagged, its planks old and splintered. Gaps between the boards leaked a stench so foul it made my throat tighten. The smell of waste, urine, and something worse, the sickly rot of infected flesh. I stopped short. My hand tugged my coat tighter. Lucy clutched my arm, her small voice shaking. "Ma'am? In there. That's Scout." "Scout?" "The dog. He showed up here 10 days ago. Grandpa said we couldn't keep him, but I cared about him. I fed him crumbs. But these last few days, he won't eat. At night, he just cries." I crouched, pried one board loose, and my heart fell straight through the floor. A Doberman pup, maybe 3 months old, lay collapsed in damp straw. His body was all bone, except for the belly and hindquarters, grotesquely swollen, stretched red, taking up nearly half his frame. The skin gleamed tight, mottled with bruises, some spots so strained it seemed ready to tear. His left hind leg was bent wrong, twisted under him. He didn't bark, didn't snap, only gasped for breath. His cloudy black eyes fixed on me, asking the only question left. "Does anyone see that I'm still here?" My throat closed. The stench slammed into my lungs, nearly enough to send me fleeing, but I couldn't. Lucy's hand gripped mine. "Ma'am, is he going to die?" A 7-year-old's question. But it carried a fear I'd never been able to answer, even in my own lifetime. From the doorway, Earl's voice rasped. "I'm old. My legs won't hold me. I can't take him anywhere. And the child, she's too little. All we could do was watch him lie there. He cries all night, like claws raking my chest." I leaned closer. Each time the pup breathed, the swollen mass on his belly trembled, stretched tighter. I knew this wasn't something small. Death hovered here, waiting. I asked Lucy, steadying my voice, "How long has he been like this?" "About 10 days. At first he could still stand, but his belly kept getting bigger. Now he can't walk. I fed him porridge. He only licked a little, then turned away. At night, he cries like someone weeping. His pee, his mess stick to him. I tried to clean him, but I couldn't. Her shoulders shook. She clutched the bread bag as if it could hold back a fate too big for her hands. I laid a hand on her shoulder, whispered, "You've done more than most grown people would. Now let me take it from here." I rose and looked at Earl. His chest heaved, eyes unfocused. "Ma'am, I've got no strength, no money left. I know, this pup may not make it, but the girl's heart is tied to him. I fear she'll break if that last hope is taken." I turned back and met Scout's gaze. It wasn't begging. It was the stare of a soul waiting for someone to decide if he mattered. I drew a deep breath, gathered my apron, and stepped inside the pen. The reek of waste and pus hit like a wall, churning my stomach. I lifted him. The body was feather-light, but the swollen mass dragged the weight unevenly. His fur clung slick, his skin damp and foul. Behind me, Lucy's voice cracked. "Ma'am, aren't you afraid?" I shook my head, pressing him to my chest. "I'm afraid of leaving him here one more day." A gust rattled the doorway. I carried Scout out, the feel of him in my arms like holding something the world had long abandoned. Earl's dim eyes blinked fast. "You'll take him. I've got nothing to give back," I answered, quiet but firm. "You don't owe me a thing. This is something I must do." Lucy ran after me, tears streaming. "Ma'am, if you save him, will he remember this home?" I bent low, touched my forehead to hers. "If a creature is truly loved, it will always find its way home." I wrapped Scout in a clean baking cloth and laid him in my basket. The smell of infection still clung, but I no longer cared. There was only one decision left inside me. Whatever the cost, he had to be saved. And so, in that worn-out yard, an old widow, a 7-year-old girl, and a sickly grandfather stood together, sending a battered Doberman pup on his last chance at life. I held Scout tight against my chest, feeling his little body trembling, each shallow breath flickering like a candle about to go out. The swollen mass bulged to one side, twisting his frame so badly I had to grip him firmly to keep him from sliding through my arms. The stench of pus, waste, and dried blood clung to my coat, but fear of the smell was gone. I feared only one thing, that if I moved too slowly, he would die right there in my arms. Lucy ran beside me, clutching the bag of bread to her chest like it was the last treasure she had. Earl struggled to stand in the doorway, his hand trembling on the rotting frame. "Mabel, are you sure? I don't want you to carry more sorrow." I turned back, my voice low but steady. "The real sorrow is watching him die and doing nothing. I won't let that happen." I swung open the door of my old pickup. The passenger seat was already covered with cloth. I laid Scout down. He let out a weak moan, hind legs twitching in pain. Lucy climbed in right after, pressing close to him, her tiny hand stroking his head. "Ma'am, does it hurt him like when I fall down?" I swallowed hard, forcing a gentle smile. "Much worse than that, child. But we're going to help him." The truck roared, the tired engine whining like it disapproved. Gravel rattled under the tires. In the mirror, I saw Earl standing still, his hand over his eyes, as if in prayer. The drive to the small vet clinic behind the old gas station should have been 15 minutes. That day, it felt like a lifetime. Every curve made Scout whimper, his belly bumping against the seat. Lucy leaned over, sliding the bread bag under him like a pillow, whispering, "Scout, don't leave me. We'll go home and eat bread together." I gripped the wheel tighter, my eyes blurring. That picture, a 7-year-old child comforting a dying pup, was almost more than my old heart could bear. At last, the faded vet clinic sign came into view, paint peeling in strips. I rushed inside with Scout in my arms. A middle-aged woman came out from behind the desk, hair tied back, sharp eyes behind her glasses. Dr. Caroline Brooks. She took one look and gasped, "Oh, Lord, bring him in now." We laid him on the cold steel table. Caroline snapped on her gloves and switched on the exam light. Her fingers moved gently over the swollen belly, tapping, pressing. Her voice dropped. "This swelling is massive, likely a complicated hernia or a tumor with infection. The abdominal wall is paper thin. It could rupture at any moment." Every word landed in my chest like a hammer. Lucy tugged at my sleeve. "Is he going to die, Grandma?" I couldn't answer. I looked at Caroline, waiting for a flicker of hope. She pulled off her gloves, lifted her eyes. "He needs surgery immediately." But the cost, anesthesia, the operation, recovery, the risks are high and... I didn't let her finish. I opened my bag. Inside was a tin box filled with coins, every spare dollar I had saved through years of baking bread. I poured them out on the table. Quarters and nickels clattered across the metal like rain, carrying the faint scent of cinnamon. Then I pulled off the silver ring from my finger, the old wedding band scratched from the days when my husband was still alive. I set it down, my hand shaking. "Take it all. Just save him." Caroline froze, her eyes flickering. She knew this wasn't just money. It was a memory. It was my whole life. Lucy looked up at me, her eyes brimming. "Grandma Mabel, you gave everything?" I smoothed her hair, whispering, "Scout is worth it." "We don't abandon anyone." Caroline drew a deep breath, then nodded. "All right. I'll do everything I can." She carried Scout into the operating room. The door closed, leaving Lucy and me alone in the hall. We sat on cold plastic chairs. I saw her hugging the bread bag tightly, her eyes fixed on the door, her lips moving in silent prayer. I leaned back against the wall, heart pounding wildly. I'd lived through losses, my husband, my quiet springs, but never had life and death felt so close, breathing on the same line. From behind the door came the sharp beeping of the monitor, each note stabbing the silence. I clasped my rough hands together, eyes shut, every second stretching like a century. Then Lucy's whisper broke through. "Grandma, do dogs hear prayers?" I turned to her, met those wide, innocent eyes, and whispered back, my voice breaking. "Today, I believe they do." And so we sat there, two small souls in a cold hallway, holding on to fragile faith in the miracle taking place behind the closed door. The metal door clanged shut behind Caroline, sounding like a sentence being passed. The narrow hallway glowed under cold fluorescent light, making Lucy's face look even paler. She sat pressed against me, both hands clutching the bread bag as if letting go would make everything vanish. From inside the operating room, the monitor echoed. Beep, beep, steady, then slowing, then rushing again. Each note pierced my chest like a needle. I had heard those sounds before, the day my husband lay on his hospital bed. And now, with those same beeps, another fragile life hung by a thread. Lucy tilted her head up and whispered, "Grandma, if he doesn't wake up, will Scout know we tried everything?" I laid my hand on her shoulder. My voice rasped. "He will know, child, because a heart always recognizes where love is." Time froze. I heard the clatter of metal tools, Caroline's clipped commands to the nurse. Sweat rolled down my back, though the hallway was cold. I had endured loss before, but waiting like this felt more helpless than anything I'd known. Then the door burst open. Caroline stepped out, mask pulled down, sweat dampening her hairline. She panted, eyes locking on mine. We drained the fluid, Cleared the abdominal cavity. Nearly half a liter. Scout made it through the narrowest gate, but he's very weak. The road ahead is long. My chest sagged. I nodded, lips trembling. As long as there's a road, I'll walk it with him. Caroline gave a small nod, then turned back inside. I pulled Lucy into my arms. She broke into sobs, the kind that tore loose every burden she'd held inside. I let my own tears fall into her tangled hair. Hours later, we were allowed into recovery. Scout lay on a pale blue pad, an IV line in his front leg, a monitor pulsing beside him. His belly was wrapped in clean bandages, rising and falling weakly, eyes half closed, his breath as thin as a thread. Lucy crept closer, whispering, "Scout, can you hear me? Please don't leave us." I dragged a plastic chair next to him and sat down. Looking at him, I saw how delicate life was. One wrong turn and it could slip away. I remembered decades ago when my husband and I lost our first child, that hollow emptiness in my hands. And I swore to myself, not this time. I would not let that happen again. By the second day after surgery, Scout still wouldn't eat. He just lay still. I thought of my mother's remedy for the sick, clear bone broth with a touch of cinnamon and salt. I asked the clinic kitchen and made it myself. When it cooled, I poured some into a small spoon and held it to Scout's nose. He didn't move. Lucy stood by, eyes brimming. I whispered, "Scout, if you have any strength left, give me one sign, just one. A lick, a stronger breath. Show me you want to stay." My hand shook as I held the spoon. 1 minute, 2, then his little black nose twitched. A longer breath. His tongue brushed the spoon in a trembling lick. I broke down, sobbing so hard I couldn't speak. Lucy gasped, "He hurt us!" "Grandma, he chose to live." Caroline stood in the doorway, her eyes shining, her voice soft as wind. "You two just did something medicine can never do. Scout isn't alive because of the drugs. He's alive because of this love." I bent down, pressed my forehead to his. Tears soaked his soft fur. "Thank you, boy, for choosing to stay." That night, I didn't go home. I sat on the hard chair, my hand resting on the steel bars of his kennel. When Scout shivered in his sleep, caught in nightmares, I slid down to the floor, slipped my open palm inside. He laid his chin across it, exhaling a long breath, light as morning mist. And in that moment I knew. We had just become a family. In the days after the surgery, the recovery room became our temporary home. Scout lay on a pale blue pad, his belly wrapped in white bandages, an IV line taped to his front leg. Every beep from the monitor made my heart squeeze. His breaths were shallow, but he was breathing, and to me, that was already a miracle. Lucy came every day. She brought her second-grade reader, sat by his bed, and read aloud in her small, halting voice. "The cat says meow. The dog wags his tail." I watched Scout. His eyes stayed half-closed, but I believed he was listening. Sometimes his brow twitched, as if trying to respond. Earl couldn't make the trip. His body was too weak, but he sent over his old radio. I turned on the country station. The music crackled, but it filled the tense silence. On the third afternoon, I brought a bowl of bone broth. I sat down, lifted a spoonful, and held it close to Scout's mouth. This time, he didn't just lick. He swallowed a tiny sip, painfully slow but deliberate. I broke down in tears, tears of joy. Lucy clapped her hands, throwing her arms around me. "Scout wants to live, Grandma." Caroline stepped in and gave a nod. He's taken a big step. But he needs more than food. He needs to feel safe. That night, Scout's sleep was restless. Near midnight, he jolted awake, hind legs twitching, soft whimpers escaping like nightmares had followed him in. I didn't hesitate. I slid to the cold floor and slipped my palm inside the kennel. For a few seconds, nothing. Then, slowly, his chin lowered onto my hand. A long breath eased out, soft as morning mist. Tears soaked the back of my hand. I didn't dare move. Just let him sleep like that until morning. And I understood. We had just crossed the threshold of trust. By the 5th day, Scout could lift his head. His eyes stayed open longer, watching me, watching Lucy. When I told stories about my late husband, he blinked slowly, as if listening. I told him about the old family dog, about winters buried in snow. Lucy told him about her grandpa, about the first time she dared to buy bread on her own. Each story was a thread, weaving a fabric of family that Scout was now part of. One morning, I shredded a piece of chicken, set it in a small bowl, and placed it on the floor. Something brushed my ankle. I looked down. Scout's tail was moving. The first wag. Weak, uneven, but enough to make me cry. I sank down. Vision blurred. "Welcome home, Scout." Lucy clapped, her smile beaming. "See, Grandma? He wants to stay with us." Scout finished every bite, then lifted his head to meet my eyes. His gaze was brighter, almost saying, "Thank you for not giving up on me." In the days that followed, we took turns caring for him. I managed the medicine and changed his bandages. Lucy read aloud and never stopped talking to him. Earl, though frail, called often. "Is he stronger yet? Is he sleeping through the night?" Caroline stopped in to check, smiling each time. "I've never seen a dog recover so quickly. He's not surviving just on medicine. He's surviving on this love." I looked at Scout and saw it clearly. He was no longer the dying soul abandoned in a pigsty. He was learning to trust, to love, to exist not in fear but in the circle of arms, waiting for him. That night I sat again by his kennel. He didn't tremble from nightmares as much anymore. When I slid my hand inside, he didn't just rest his chin. He nudged closer, pressed his face into my palm, and breathed evenly. I whispered, "You've chosen life. Now learn to live happily." Under the dim fluorescent glow, I saw Lucy asleep in the chair, her reader fallen from her lap. Scout lay still, his breathing steady, and for the first time in years I felt peace return to my heart. It was a gentle, rainy afternoon when I carried Scout out of the clinic. He was wrapped in my old blanket, his head resting on the cloth pillow that once belonged to my husband. The pickup rattled over the rough road, the damp scent of earth mixing with the faint trace of disinfectant. I glanced at the passenger seat. Scout wasn't asleep. His eyes were open just enough to look out the window as if asking, "Am I really allowed to go home?" My little kitchen soon had a new corner. I set a small bed right beside the oven, laid clean towels, and placed a bowl of water. Patch, the old gray cat, sat on the table, watching closely. I worried he might hiss, but instead he jumped down, circled Scout once, and curled up nearby. I let out a sigh of relief. Lucy taped up a sheet of paper with colored pencil scribbles. Scout's corner. She grinned from ear to ear. This is his spot. Like a real home Scout didn't dare step out yet. He stayed put, eyes following every movement. I didn't push him. I simply set his food close by, letting him decide when he was ready. That night, I spread a blanket on the sofa just a few steps away. Lucy perched beside me, whispering, "Grandma, do you think he's scared of his new home?" I smoothed her hair. Everyone is at first, but he'll learn this is a safe place. The first night I woke around 2 in the morning to a faint sound. Looking down, I saw Scout had left his bed and curled himself under the table, pressed against the wall, trembling like he was still hiding from the past. I didn't call him, didn't drag him out. I just sat quietly on the floor, reached my hand into the shadows. A moment later, his damp nose touched my palm, then his chin rested there. His breathing slowed, evened out. I smiled and closed my eyes. That cold kitchen floor had just become a bridge between two souls learning to trust. The next day, I cooked minced chicken with thin porridge. Scout ate slowly but finished the whole bowl. Each time, Lucy clapped and cheered. Earl couldn't visit, but he called every morning. "Is he standing yet?" "Did he eat today?" I held the phone and told him every detail, hearing his soft sigh of relief on the other end. A week later, Scout took his first steps in the kitchen. His tail still tucked, but the trembling was gone. I offered him a crumb of bread, and to my surprise, his little tail wagged. I burst into tears. Lucy threw her arms around him. "See, Grandma? He wants to stay with us now." I thought of Caroline's words. He needs to feel safe. And I knew. We were giving him exactly that. In the mornings, while I kneaded dough, Scout lay near my feet. Patch jumped on the table, overseeing. Lucy sprinkled flour on the loaves, giggling as she worked. That kitchen, once filled only with the hum of the mixer and the crackle of fire, now rang with children's laughter and the click of puppy paws. One thought struck me. I sewed a small cloth satchel, light enough to tie around Scout's side. I wanted to see if he could carry a few loaves to the neighbors. That afternoon, I placed 2 loaves inside, crouched down, and looked into his eyes. "Scout, this is yours." "Let's deliver some bread." Lucy squeezed my hand, clapping. "Like a male dog." Scout tilted his head, then stood, slow but steady. Together we walked to Mrs. Ruth's house, just 3 doors down. Scout carried the bread, Lucy ran beside him, and I followed close behind. When Mrs. Ruth opened the door, she laughed with delight. "Good heavens, Mabel! This dog delivers bread?" Scout stood still as she lifted the loaves from his bag, then turned to me as if waiting for approval. I nodded. "Good boy, Scout." His tail wagged harder, this time full of confidence. On the way back, Lucy wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, "Scout, where's our home?" He didn't bark. He simply tugged her hand gently toward the glowing kitchen window, and in that moment, I saw it plain. We had become a family. That spring, for the first time, my backyard echoed with the sound of running paws. Scout, once the pup who lay motionless in a pigsty, was now racing across the grass, ears perked, tail wagging without pause. Lucy chased after him, laughter spilling into the wind, her hair flying free. Earl sat in his wooden chair on the porch, his old face glowing brighter than any medicine could ever bring. I stood at the doorway, hands still dusted with flour, watching until my eyes blurred. Not from sorrow, but from a happiness so great it made this tired heart beat strong again. Scout bounded toward me, the little cloth satchel bouncing at his side, filled with warm sourdough loaves. He stopped right in front of me, lifted his head, his eyes shining like stars. I bent down, pressed my forehead to his, and whispered, "You found your way home, Scout. This is where you belong." That night, I left the kitchen light glowing softly. Lucy fell asleep on the sofa, Patch curled at her feet. Scout climbed up beside me, lay his head across my lap, breathing steadily. I felt his warmth seep into my chest, filling the empty spaces my husband had left behind. And I realized it wasn't just me saving Scout. Scout was saving me too. saving this whole house. The next day, when Scout and Lucy carried bread to the neighbors, people stopped, clapped, and smiled through tears. They didn't see just a dog. They saw living proof that no life is worthless. Every step he took declared, "I deserve to live." And everyone deserves to be loved. From that day on, my little kitchen wasn't just a place to sell bread and survive. It became a place where hope was baked fresh each morning. Scout, Lucy, Earl, and I, we had stitched a family back together from scraps we thought could never mend. If you had stood there and seen it, you'd understand why I cried while I smiled, why I believe that compassion, no matter how small, can change the fate of a life. And I believe, deep in your own heart, you've probably had a moment like that too. A time when you stopped and reached out. A stray cat trembling in the rain, a shivering dog by the roadside, or even a stranger who just needed a hand. Scout taught me this. When we save a life, we also save the gentlest part of ourselves. So here, my story with Scout comes to a close. But I know out there, countless lives are still waiting for someone to reach out. Maybe a dog, maybe a cat, maybe even a lonely neighbor down the street. I want to ask you, listening to my story now, have you ever saved a life? A small creature shivering in the storm? Or a fragile soul who needed your arms? And if you did, are they still with you today? If so, share it in the comments below. I believe your story can be a hope for someone else, just as Scout became the light for our family. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe, not just to hear more stories like this, but to remind each other of one simple truth. No life is beyond saving. I'll see you again in the next story. And remember, always keep your heart open, because someday, when it matters most, you may be the one chosen to save a life.